So, good afternoon, good morning to you all. Welcome to today's webcast. My name is Helen Beal, and today I'm joined by my colleague Malcolm. Malcolm, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
So today we're going to be talking about impediments to DevOps success. Prior to this call, Malcolm and I had a bit of a chat about what we mean by impediments. We mean obstacles. It's quite a common term that we use a lot when we're talking about agile. It's of course the main job of a Scrum Master is to help us remove these impediments, but it's not the Scrum Master's role to remove all these impediments that we're talking about around DevOps success. So we've put together a short agenda today, so we're going to be looking at three things. So we're going to set the ground with what success looks like. Then we're going to talk about these typical obstacles or impediments that we are facing, and then we shall talk about the solutions that we have to tackle some of these problems. So let's start with what success looks like. So what we're really talking about here is that end goal of DevOps. So that flow being optimized from idea to value realization. So we have this frictionless environment where things are delivered really fast and everyone's really happy, in a nutshell. So we do a lot of assessments, and this is one of the maturity matrices that we often use in an assessment to help people understand where they're at. So it's like baselining the current state, but also where they want to go. So you can see we've got you'll probably be familiar with these sort of things before, but you can see on the left we've got the different levels. And then along the top, this is what we call the DevOps values. So these are the CALMS values, so culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. Those of you familiar with CALMS will know that it was originated as CAMS by John Willis, one of the kind of first thinkers around DevOps, came up with CAMS, and Lean was added later by Jez Humble, who is one of the co-authors of the DevOps Handbook and also the Annual State of DevOps reports, and also author of Continuous Delivery and Lean Enterprise. So we often use these 5 things when we're trying to understand what's going on with an organisation. So, Malcolm, how would you describe a good DevOps culture? What sort of attributes does it have?
I think that when we've been involved with many of our customers, culture is always very high on the list for most people. So it's all about collaboration, working together, following the 3 ways. So around feedback, flow, and continual learning and experimentation, and getting that whole working together attitude flowing a lot more seamlessly.
We love flow. So Lean's all about flow. As you said, the first way of 3 ways is all about flow. So that's what we're really aiming for. What does bad culture look like then? What kind of attributes do we see? Things like maybe...
Well, we've seen a lot of siloed environments, people being very protective over their own environment and the way that they operate within their own contained world, and not everyone is up for sharing and collaborating, and that restricts, and people aren't communicating and making sure that the end goals and the outcomes are positive.
Yeah, and it can be painful, and failure is frowned upon and not embraced as a learning opportunity, and blame and all of those sorts of things. So I think we have a fairly clear idea with DevOps what we're aiming for: highly collaborative environment where we're able to produce change very quickly. So we've got good throughput and good stability at the same time. So let's have a look at the obstacles that we face to getting to these optimum states. So I wanted to put this word in here. I know that Malcolm and you and I see this such a lot with the organisations that we work with. We often do assessments, and well, as I mentioned, part of the assessment is about baselining the current state, and part of it's about describing the future state and the roadmap between those 2 states. And what we often see is this kind of momentum that gets lost, doesn't it, Malc, as people try and do this stuff?
It does indeed. A challenge.
It is a big challenge. So what is causing that inertia or that lack of momentum? Well, this quite useful survey was done fairly recently by this company, Quali. And it summarised the top 10 obstacles that people are facing, as reported by the respondents of this survey. So there's a kind of a summary over on the left. So 54% of respondents said that they had no access to self-service infrastructure. So they were using tickets, and 23% of executives said that this infrastructure could be delivered in less than 24 hours, which is quite good. But 33 said it takes up to a month, and 26 said it takes 1 month or more. So that is 59%. That's a lot of people that are finding it quite painful to get just infrastructure delivered. We just talked about culture specifically, and I did pick on that for a reason, knowing that this was coming up, because this is the number one area, as Malcolm also said, that people really feel is holding them back from doing things in a more DevOps manner. So there's this idea of focusing on building a collaborative culture here with shared goals and electing champions. We've got some case studies we're going to share with you today, which is going to give you some hints and tips on things we can do there to change culture as well. The next one is test automation. And I often say this about the assessments that we do. There's not a cookie cutter approach. Everybody is different, but there are patterns. They're like, I would kind of describe it as fingerprints. Everybody has their own unique pattern, but we see a lot of commonalities. And this is a really common one, is people having problems around test automation. And this coming kind of late and last, and people doing some kind of crazy things, sometimes like 3-week sprints where we've got a 2-week development sprint and then we've got a week of UAT, and painful things like that go on. The third one there, it's behind my panel so I can't see it. The third one is legacy. So Malcolm, tell us about some of the things that we see around legacy in our customer base.
Well, we've recently experienced a lot of legacy challenges where applications that have been written maybe for 20, 25 years that are still being operated, being looked after by a small group of people, and all that knowledge is all contained in one very small area, and moving away from it has created some challenges, and DevOps is very much being used as a method to bring those applications more into a modern, more agile way of development or redevelopment of those legacy applications. And you know, when you do go down that road and down that roadmap, you're then creating an environment where everyone will be able to understand, rewrite, and readapt some of those applications, where at the moment it's very difficult.
And it's such a big topic, this one, that actually the last webcast we did was focused purely on doing DevOps in legacy systems. And as Malk says, you know, there's some really big challenges out there in terms of how to re-architect applications, use things like microservices and containerization to help us basically do things small batch. So we want to do everything in DevOps is about doing things little and often, basically. And that's what we need to do with legacy. And people get really stuck on this. And there was a quote I found when we were doing the webcast before on legacy, which was, there is no such thing as legacy systems, just legacy thinking. And we really like that because, as Malk says, part of it is about going agile, so reorganizing ourselves in that way, and part of it is re-architecting applications in a way that allows us to address them in a small batch manner. Very closely linked to that is the app complexity one. So, you know, lots and lots of spaghetti code out there, and lots of dependencies, which make it hard sometimes to see how to break applications down and do things in a smaller way. The fifth one here, no DevOps plan. So this is an interesting one to me because we've talked for quite a while, and people talk a lot about DevOps transformations, and we started talking about DevOps evolution more frequently, because what we've felt and found and observed with transformation is that people didn't like the word very much. It has a lot of baggage in a lot of areas that we work in, and people are quite scared of it, and it's meant things like redundancies and things in the past. And there is no magic bullet with DevOps. We're going to see this in some of the case stories. It is a journey, and it's often a journey that doesn't have an end. It's about continuous improvement at its very core. So it kind of spins us around then. If it's about evolution, what sort of plan do we actually put in place? But I think regardless of that, there needs to be some sort of conversation with people about what we're doing when we're doing DevOps. And this is, again, the thing that we're trying to do with the assessment is give us that basis for those sort of conversations. Then we've got managing environments being tough. So, yeah, I think that's true of lots of people, and certainly the nearer people get to cloud, the easier that becomes, and all sorts of things become easier with cloud. One of the things that we often hear about testing is that people find it very hard to stand up production-like test environments, and that's something that cloud can really help people with. The seventh one, the skill set. So, again, a topic we've focused on quite a lot in the past. So we've done webcasts on Don't Hire, Grow Your Own, and also on what is a DevOps engineer. This idea that we need to go out to the market and hire loads of DevOps people, we think is fundamentally kind of misled. You've got the people. What you need to do is help them improve and teach them the skills. And we're going to talk about our solutions at the end, but this is one of the core things that we do for customers, is help them train across teams in terms of what DevOps really means. The eighth one is budget. So this is a tough one for lots of organisations. Malcolm, do you have any observations based on your interactions with customers on how they can get budget or justify budget against business objectives for DevOps improvement?
I think all organisations have got to demonstrate business outcomes. So whatever happens as regards to the IT shop and how they start investing into a DevOps culture, there really has to be an outcome that can be measured against the business activity. And I think once you get to that stage, budgets are a lot easier to obtain when they can get that measurement. And it all comes back to what Helen said before, around comms. And it's that measuring bit against business activity. And once you can prove that, then budgets are a lot easier to obtain. And that's what we've experienced over the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
Absolutely. And I've got a case study that's going to help us talk a bit more about budget as well in a moment. The ninth one on there, tools. It says avoid fragmented tool set adoption. This is a big problem. So the DevOps tool chain is a really big challenge for most organisations we work with. We've been delivering a lot of the foundation courses lately, and so many customers have said that they just kind of don't know where to start with architecting a tool chain. There are so many tools out there that they want more conversations to be had between companies about how they're architecting tool chains and what tools they're using. What we see in a lot of organisations, in fact, pretty much all organisations, regardless of size, is that because it's so easy to get tools now, you can download them off the internet, that we do get massive tool sprawl. So there's huge amounts of duplication in all organisations. It's also a really emotive subject. People don't like to be told what tools to use. And lots of people have favourites that they know and they've loved and are used to using. So there has to be some flexibility in there. The Spotify engineering videos, actually, I was watching them again just yesterday, actually just preparing for the DevOps leader exam. And one of the things that they were saying is that they don't prescribe what their teams will use from a tool, but there is kind of like a cross-pollination that happens. And tools become standardized across teams as they become the most kind of popular and a de facto standard. So Git, for example, became a de facto standard across the teams. So it's very challenging, the tools area. And then finally, executive support. So DevOps is very much a grassroots thing. It starts in grassroots. It started as a Twitter hashtag. Much of the push of DevOps through an organisation often happens from the grassroots, but we really need top-down support as well. for it to happen, and it's very closely linked to number 8, the budget. The reason we need executive support is because they're typically the ones that hold the purse strings, so we need their buy-in to make investments for change. Malcolm, thoughts on executive support? When we're doing things like the games and assessments and stuff, how do we get those people involved?
I think just turning that question around just slightly, organisations are getting far more integrated. So the executive C-level suite people are much more integrated into the people that are defining the applications that deliver those business processes. And like we have seen in the past, is that many companies that we're talking to say they're a technology company, but they just happen to sell insurance, for instance. And we've seen this time and time again. And when we do a game or a business simulation based on the Phoenix project, and we bring all these people together, it really does cement that whole philosophy of bringing everyone working to that common goal, and people can understand their roles. And if they're not collaborating and integrating and understanding what the outcome is, they can see it could actually take a major effect on what that business does deliver.
And we're going to keep on coming back to that point you've made about companies being technology companies that just happen to do insurance or sell clothes or whatever it is. So here's our first case study I wanted to share with you today. So I picked this one, EasyJet. I picked this one because of what John has to say about budgeting. So most organisations budget in a very waterfall manner annually. Sometimes budgets may be spent sort of 15 months after they were first thought up in some kind of budget round. So it doesn't really fit with our our agile model of doing things very little and often. So we need to think of budget in a much more agile way. So we think about things like continuous funding, and we need to think about experimentation. So as Malcolm said earlier on, when we were talking about good culture and embedding the 3 ways, the third way, continuous experimentation and learning, is very closely linked here. And this helps us because it takes some of the fear out of project estimation. So if we're looking for words that describe bad culture, one of those words would be fear. We need to have a lot of courage when we're doing things like DevOps. We need to create places where people are free to experiment and learn, ideally have time put aside to experiment and learn, and that failure is viewed as a learning opportunity, and that systems are in place to create a culture of safety. So we can do things like have very good testing environments, have the ability to fix things very quickly if they go wrong, preempt failure, all sorts of different mechanisms we can put in place to help with that. So I love what John's said here as well. I've always tried and pull out a really pertinent quote on the top right, but DevOps can give more clarity to costs. I love that idea. So, it's really moving away from, we have to do things in a waterfall manner and do tons and tons of planning. Otherwise, we won't know how big this thing is. John's opinion here is that it actually makes things more relevant, as he says, and more forecastable. So that's one way to really assist with the budget problem. So also collected a few comments from people that were speaking at the DevOps Enterprise Summit on what they think the big obstacles are. So Oliver here confidently states that culture is the largest area to transform. Christopher, cultural shift. And again, Alexa doesn't use the word culture, but she's talking about kind of workflows and communities and the habit that people have. And that's really how we define culture, is around values and behaviours and habits. So just really building on this idea that we need to address the cultural problems as we move forward. So this is really one of the things that's reflecting what Malcolm just said about IT or organisations being technology companies. We've moved away from IT aligning with the business. We've moved away from IT integrating with the business. And we're now in a place where IT is the business. And here Brian has described that as IT differentiated itself as a key value driver. So moving away from just being an order taker and to something that is actually directly connected to the business outcomes. Malcolm, is there anything else around what Brian's described here that kind of stands out as something that others can learn from? He talks here about IT having to work hard to understand the business and its expectations. I think that reflects on what you were saying earlier about getting this executive support.
No, absolutely. And I think everyone needs to find their own voice as well within their own area. And in the past, it would always be the C-level suite or the CTO that would articulate what they were trying to achieve to the business people. But now it's becoming a lot more seamless, and there's a lot more automated trust with people, where before people that were potentially there but not heard are now obviously, they do have a voice, and they are there to try and make that whole process a lot better.
And that really reflects on what Brian's saying here as well about all the technical teams being open to feedback and this ability to pivot or course correct. And he also talks about it's what you learn when you fail. So again, this idea that every failure is a learning opportunity. I love this quote from John at Barclays. Obstacles are not in the path, obstacles are the path. And, this is like a life truism, isn't it? It's like what we do all day at work pretty much is problem solve. So we shouldn't be scared of these obstacles or put off by them or think it's, we can't do it. This is what our job is, underpinning DevOps in the same way that the 3 ways underpins DevOps is the theory of constraints. And the theory of constraints is teaching us to find these obstacles, find the most important ones or the biggest impacting ones and reduce them. When we do something like take lean and do things like value stream mapping, again, we're looking for constraints, we're looking for waste, we're looking for ways to remove things that are slowing stuff down. So another case study for you. This is one of my favourites. So again, reflecting on Malcolm's comments about the importance of technology for organisations, IT has become the beating heart of the bank. Ron achieved that by his DevOps transformation. He's very much a transformation there rather than evolution. He did do something very courageous, which was basically plan a reorganisation and make everybody apply again for their jobs. So when we do the DevOps Foundation course, we talk a lot about change and people's different appetites to change, and what to do with the small group at the end of the bell curve that are the naysayers or the laggards, the people that are unlikely to really ever get brought on board with the change. And I always remember the very first time we did a DevOps Foundation course, and we had the IT director, Mike, then from Paddy Power in the course, and he said, well, I say, if you can't change the people, change the people. And there was quite a intake of breath around the room as everybody let this sink in. And Mike kind of said, well, I gave them a year, told them the journey we were going on, and they could choose whether they were going to come along or not. And if they didn't, then after a year, it was time for them to kind of get off the bus and go. It's kind of become, even though it's not officially part of the DevOps Foundation courseware, it's kind of become one of the key takeaways some of my other customers have told me when they've had multiple people come to multiple public scheduled courses. But yeah, Ron was pretty brave. I don't think we've seen anyone else, Malcolm, do something that dramatic.
I don't think so. And his story is well known within the industry. I think most people know the process he went through, and I think he's up there, as you said, being very courageous.
Very courageous. And, it's a relatively small company compared to some of the organisations we work with. So I think that, his approach just doesn't work for everybody. So we've kind of been working through some of the solutions, but let's talk a little bit more about some of the stuff we can do. As I said earlier, culture is quite a nebulous thing. It's quite a nebulous word, and we can't change culture, but we can change people's behaviour. So we can train people to understand what iterative development looks like. We can train people to obtain titles like Scrum Master or Product Owner. We can train people on how to do value stream mapping. We can help people understand how to write user stories as tests and do test-driven development. We can help people use collaborative tools. You can't make someone collaborate. I don't think you can you, Malcolm? I don't think you can force somebody to collaborate, but you can.
I think you can nurture them, Helen.
Yeah, that's a better word. Encourage, nurture, support, and reward. We can do all of those things.
That's it. Make them feel extremely wanted.
Yes. So those are kind of some of the behaviours that we do like, I guess. So we do want people to be sharers. We do want people to be willing to collaborate. We do want people that will try and do things better. We do want people that are courageous and that understand that failure is a learning opportunity and are willing to experiment and come to the table with ideas. So those are all kind of behaviours that we do like and want to, as Malcolm says, nurture. So another case study for you. This one is specifically about kind of this obstacle around budgets and executive support. So what Mark from Aviva says, and again, that top right-hand corner, the thing that I pull out is just really, really pertinent. He says, so when I stood in front of our chief executive and the board and said, I think this is the right thing to do, it wasn't a case of, are you sure? It was a case of, here's the evidence. And that reflects back on what Malcolm was saying again about the M in calms, this importance of measurement. This Malcolm also talked about automating trust and building trust and having a high trust environment. And this is the kind of stuff that helps us do this. If we have the data and we're data driven, we can show people we have evidence, we have proof, and it's easier for us to decide what to do next. There's a slide coming up actually that I took from a webcast I was watching earlier on, which was called the CIO Moneyball. It's linked in the presentation slides. And he was the speaker on that particular webcast was talking very much about basically the way, and lots of you have probably seen the film Moneyball, about running IT in a data-driven way. And that's a very DevOps thing to do, is use data as much as we can. So that's Aviva. And just to reiterate what I just said, top right, driven by data. So capital one, very much using data to decide what to do. So capital one, this is a case study in partnership with one of our partners, the DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA people. So DORA is headed up by Nicole Forsgren, who is the PhD data scientist behind the State of DevOps reports, and also they have Jez Humble and Jean Kim also working at DORA as well. So we work with them, so we provide two flavours of assessment, or a single assessment that has two delivery mechanisms, if you like. So we have a physical delivery mechanism where we have 360-degree conversations, physical conversations with people. So we touch all the leadership team and all of the doers and deliverers of work. And then the DORA assessment for larger organisations enables us to break the constraint, the physical constraint that we have, in that we can only have a certain number of conversations in a certain period of time, because the DORA assessment uses the data from the State of DevOps report and virtualises the assessment process. So it sends out an email survey essentially to as many people as you want. And it then collects that data from, it has to be the technical people that respond to the survey. It collects all of that data and gives us another way of looking at the constraints and the priority matrices there. So very powerful tool. Another one, I think this company is very well known to you, I think, Malcolm.
It is indeed.
Yes.
I did used to work for them many years ago.
Yeah. So you may or may not know Stephen. I think it was quite a while ago that you were there. But Stephen says, like most things worth doing, implementing a culture of DevOps takes time. Of course it does, because we're talking about changing the behaviour potentially of hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. So, you know, it takes time to teach people what DevOps principles and practices are. It takes time for people to understand them, and then it takes time for people to actually put them into practice. As well. But Stephen has some advice, encouraging anyone going down this path to start small and deliberately. Again, reflecting on what Malcolm said, measure the impacts of each organisational change that you make, embrace what works and celebrate the things you learn from what doesn't work. So again, this idea of learning from failure. And then reflecting on something I said earlier, that, you know, in many respects in DevOps, all we're doing really is continuous improvement. It's a set of principles and practices that have a name that is driven out of the recognition that the traditional siloed way that we have stood up our IT departments has caused conflict and constraints and waste. But really all we're trying to do is do things faster, better, and in higher quality all the time. I'm just going to move on to the next one. Yes, so this one I wanted to include. This is Target, so very large US retailer. Again, this idea, we are a technology company. Heather stands on stage at the DevOps Enterprise Company and uses those words, we are a technology company. So she's no longer thinking that Target is thinking of themselves as a group of stores, bricks and mortar stores selling clothes and things. She is very much aware that they are driven by technology. She and Ross do this, and again, it's linked in the presentation. She and Ross do this presentation together, and they really talk through how they call it bottoms up and tops down, which is, I've never really heard that before. Have you heard that before? I've heard of bottom up and top down, but not bottoms and tops. Mal?
Maybe it's something to do with the clothing brand.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's got something to do. Yeah, there. So anyway, one of the things that was really interesting about them talking about their journey was they were very aware about the things that they were doing to get that grassroots movement going and to get the top-down movements and getting that executive support that is so important in terms of getting authority and budget and helping us move stuff forward. And they did lots of these tools, hackathons. They've had 6 internal DevOps Days events. They've had people come and speak to them. We do this a lot for our customers. Some of you on the call will have been at our lunch and learns that we help customers with. We do donut and learns. We do cake and learns. We'll come and help you get the DevOps word out in your organisation if that's something that will help you move the dial on your DevOps evolution. And then, sorry, it was just a bit slow. So this is the slide that I said that I took from the Moneyball CIO presentation that I was looking at earlier on. We talk a lot about metrics that matter. Again, that M in calm's coming out. I usually talk about, for me, the key metric that matters is about IT being able to report value to the business. So being able to say, we have delivered this much change, which equals this much value. So, for example, we've put a new feature in, which has improved our conversion rate on our insurance policy site. It would be a way that we could articulate that to some organisations. This webcast I was watching earlier, they talked about this one, about business satisfaction is IT's key metric. And this is, again, it's talking about if IT is that high performing, and there is a correlation between a high performing IT organisation and a high performing organisation that's been proven several times over now in the State of DevOps reports and the data that the team have collected. I think over 27,000 responses in 6 years over the time that's been running. But this shows us that if we have a lot of business satisfaction, that means that IT are transformative. They are an innovator and they have a very significant impact on that company's survival or ability to thrive. Malcolm, where do you think most of the organisations we work with sit currently on that scale?
As a percentage?
Yeah, I kind of feel that most people we work with are probably around sort of 60 to 70, 70 to 80. I think a lot of firefighting still.
I would say that's around about the mark.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this idea of IT being an order taker.
And we see that a lot, don't we? When we're conducting our DevOps maturity assessment, and you may recall when Helen brought up that slide earlier, we see a lot of that firefighting and support issues, and you know, through the maturity assessment, we try to roadmap them to get to a more stable place on the percentage chart.
We do. So we know this tough stuff is tough. We spend all day, every day, trying to help people move the needle in various different ways on their DevOps maturity and get that flow optimized. So that flow from when somebody has an idea about doing something to the moment that is live and realizing value for the business. We do have a philosophy at Range 4 that we can't do DevOps for you. Change must come from within. So we've built a portfolio of services that help you do that yourselves with our expert guidance based on what we've learned from all the other organisations that we are lucky enough to work with. So we call our portfolio E3. It has 3 parts to it. So we have the explore part of the portfolio. So we've talked about the assessments already, so the physical and virtual assessments that you can run in tandem to really get as much coverage through your organisation as you want. We also have things like the DevOps Liftoff Workshop, which is designed to get a bunch of sort of 15 or 20 people in a room together to understand what DevOps is, get a common understanding, and get a very high level roadmap knocked out during the course of the day, where we'll do some exercises around things like Kanban and architecting tool chains and writing business cases and understanding what behaviour looks like and how to move the change that sort of thing. Malc, do you want to talk about our Educate portfolio a bit?
The education has grown dramatically, actually, over the last 18 months. So we are a registered trainer with the DevOps Institute, and we deliver a lot of training to many enterprise organizations around the DevOps Foundation course. There is a follow-on now from the DevOps Foundation course called the DevOps Leader. There's DevSecOps, which is become very important for many. And I saw an article recently that Gartner published that that in the next few years, security is going to be coming very much in the forefront, and many organizations are going to look back and think, oh, did we put the right security in early on in the development lifecycle? We have many courses. We'll be happy to talk more about them. If you look at our website around the Educate, you'll get a good flavour of what we offer. They are accredited via PeopleCert, and it's recognised worldwide. So we'd love to talk to you more about those.
Sure would. As part of the Educate portfolio as well, we also have our experiential learning opportunity for you all, which is the Phoenix Project game. So many of you will be familiar with the Phoenix Project book. So with our Dutch partner GamingWorks, who have many years experience of writing these sort of business simulation games, we teamed up and basically taken the Phoenix Project book and made it into a game, so you can play characters from the book and experience the journey that Bill and his team went on. We have a free game. I think at least one person on the call today will be seeing tomorrow at a free game that we are running, so people can try it out for size and see if they like it. If you're not coming tomorrow and you are interested, I think we've got another one that we're going to announce once we've done the one tomorrow, which is going to be sort of mid-October. So let us know if you're interested in that and you haven't received any information and you want to get booked on it. And then finally, we have the Evolve catalogue of service options, and that includes things like lean tools like value stream mapping. So we do a lot of facilitation of value stream mapping sessions. We also train people to do value stream mapping themselves. We also do lots of work around the automation piece in terms of evolution, so helping people build on CI, build to continuous delivery, as Malcolm just described as well, helping people tackle things around how to automate security into a DevOps pipeline, and how to complete what we call the DevOps loop, which is basically a continuous release cycle. So how to get our idea to value realization traceable and measurable. So we work very closely with people like Atlassian and Dynatrace to do things like have Dynatrace report on the value of an idea that it recognises as a user story in Jira, for example. And lots of work around the ITSM side, including things like the service desk and support into that too. So there's loads of ways that we can help you identify these constraints and move them out of the way and get your maturity levels improved. Have I missed anything, Mark, that you think I should have mentioned there?
I don't think so. I think we've covered pretty much what we wanted to.
Fabulous. In that case,
probably slightly overrun, I would have thought.
Yeah, we are a little bit overrun, but I think we've got most people here still. So we've got some time probably for a few questions. I can't see any that have popped up at the moment, so I'll just leave it open if anybody wants to ask a question for a minute. As I said, we're going to send you all a recording of today's session, and we'll send you a link to, I didn't mention it actually, I meant to mention it earlier, we just stood up a new LinkedIn group, or did I mention it? Anyway, we're going to send you a link to that and a link to the slides on SlideShare if you haven't downloaded them today. So I can't see any questions popping up, so I think it's probably time to say thank you everybody for your time and attention today. Oh no, I can see a question that's just popped up. There we go. What do we say to people who think technology can drive the cultural change? Yeah, that's quite a tough question. Thanks, Basil. So I guess first of all, we're saying that culture is the output of behaviours and values of people. So we're saying then that people are claiming that technology will change the culture. So the technology will change the way that people behave and the way that people value things. So I guess the type of technologies we're talking about is going to be the kind of continuous integration, continuous delivery technologies. So, the tempting answer is to say, they're wrong. And actually, cultural change has to happen with behavioural change, and tools will not be consumed if people are not ready for them and their behaviours are not conducive to those using those tools. But I think we have to be a bit kind of cleverer and make the connection between that behavioural change. So if you implement a CD pipeline and then you assume that everybody is going to naturally start using it and then their behaviour will be more collaborative, I'm not sure that logic follows. Some tools, though, could be exceptions. So, for example, a Confluence type tool might help people collaborate better. So that might change some behaviour. A Jira type tool might help people to build a backlog and think of things in a more small batch way than running up vast requirement specifications in Word in a waterfall manner. Some tools like Dynatrace or application performance monitoring tools can give us really, really fast root diagnosis of causes of problems that can really help the dev and ops teams collaborate a lot better and be more effective. So quite a long and convoluted answer, sorry about that, but I think tools don't change behaviour, but tools can support behavioural change, I think would be my shorter answer. Malcolm, do you want to summarise that for me? Or
I think, Helen, I really do think that was perfect.
Okay, good. We've got another question from Paul. Is security an obstacle? Do you find organisations don't start their journey because of fears over security? Okay, so there's two questions there. Let me tackle them one after the other. So, is security an obstacle? Right, so are security people an obstacle? Often, yes. If you read the Phoenix Project, which I'm pretty sure Paul has, but you'll remember John, the CISO, who is a bit of a pain, to put it mildly, to begin with. And lots of people read the Phoenix Project, tell us that they're reading it, and actually it's like they're living it in it. They see so much truism in there. And this is a particularly true one, I think, that we see a lot. These poor security people, there basically aren't enough of them, and they are kind of stuck in a position where they are expected to cross every T and dot every I and stuff. And they get known to be a massive constraint. They get known to be kind of bolshy and not getting on with other people. And it's often because security becomes a bit of an afterthought, and it is a problem. Do we find organisations don't start their journey because of fears over security? I don't think we do. I do think, and Malcolm mentioned the increasing prevalence of people talking about DevSecOps, particularly this year. And I think me, like many other DevOps pundits, wrote about DevSecOps being a key thing that was going to be at the forefront of people's minds this year. Malcolm and I work closely with one of our partners, Sonotype, and one of the things we offer our clients is a free scan of their software to identify what open source vulnerability components or open source components might be presenting the organisation with vulnerabilities. And it's quite an interesting one because we uncover quite a lot of risk in quite a lot of companies, but then to get them to make the change, it's almost like they'll accept the risk. So they know that there's all the problem there, but they'll prioritise, for example, the project delivery date over removing that risk. Malcolm, do you think security is an obstacle and something that's stopping people doing this stuff?
I don't think so. I think what we've experienced more recently is that many organisations have built these applications and maybe not have realised some of the security implications by using some of these open source components, and we've uncovered them, as you said, via our partner Sonotype, and we've discovered some, some pretty fundamental flaws within those environments, and keeping an eye or understanding where those vulnerabilities are is becoming more key.
Definitely. So I think, I think security does present, it feels like a unique challenge, but I actually did a talk at AppSec EU in Belfast in around May time. I was talking about DevSecOps, and someone came up to me afterwards and they kind of said, actually, security is just another thing we're testing. It's just, another word for quality in some respects. It's just another test that we need to do, which I thought was really well put. And actually, when we talk about security in the context of DevOps, and particularly DevOps automation, we talk about shifting left. So we're basically talking about doing things like putting a security tool into the developer's IDE so that they will get an alert when they pull something out of the artifact repository, which the security team have deemed as too vulnerable or inappropriate for use within that organisation. So there are a lot of parallels between quality and security, definitely. Good. So that brings us to the last question. So thank you all for your attention today. And we look forward to seeing you, speaking to you, hearing from you all very soon, and have fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.